Hello, I'm Jen. Welcome back to my channel, Literary Love 123. I like to drink coffee, wear silly headbands, and talk about fairy tales. So today I'm going to be giving you a list of fairy tale recommendations for all kinds of styles. I hope to be able to give you something that you can read for Folklore February, which is being hosted by the wonderful Kat at Kat's Novel Adventures. I will link her announcement video down in the description box below. I had hoped to get this video up over this past weekend, but unfortunately, I was not feeling too well over the weekend. But never fear. Today, when this video goes out, will be Monday, February 5th. So there's a lot of February left, including an extra day because it's a leap year. So there's plenty of time to get in some of these fairy tale readings for Folklore February. So I want to start by recommending a simple illustrated version of Grimm's fairy tales. And this one is the Brothers Grimm fairy tales with illustrations by Arthur Rackham. So I want to show you a few of these illustrations in this book. So this is one from The Golden Bird, and I really just love these vintage style books. I love the illustrations that Arthur Rackham does. I've also seen wonderful illustrations that he did for A Christmas Carol. And in addition to the color illustrations, he also has some really lovely black and white illustrations. And this one is from the 12 Dancing Princesses. And again, I'm not sure where I got this book. I've had it for quite some time. It is a Canterbury classic and it is copyright 2017, but I feel like I've had it for longer. I don't know, maybe because it's evoked such childhood memories. Here's another picture too of Rapunzel. So this one has a lot of the fairy tales that you may be familiar with, such as Little Red Riding Hood, Snow White, and Cinderella. But then it has some that you may not be as familiar with, like The White Snake, The Water of Life, and King Grizzly Bear. And the next book that I want to show to you is another book that I really love having on display. And this is The Snow Queen and Other Winter Tales. This is a 2015 Barnes and Noble special edition book. And as you can see, it's got the silver edges on the page and it has some pretty end papers too. So this one, as it says in the title, does of course contain the Snow Queen, but it also contains other stories from Hans Christian Andersen, the Grimm brothers, the Crimson Fairy book, which would be one of Andrew Lang's fairy books. So again, this is just a really, really beautiful edition that looks nice on the shelf, and there's really not any illustrations in it, but I do like the font that's used for these titles. And again, you may be able to find this one possibly on Amazon or Thrift Books. And the next book that I want to talk to you about is a combination of the classic fairy tales with scholarly commentary too. So if you're looking to dive in a little bit deeper to some academic studies of the fairy tales, then this Norton Critical Edition, the classic fairy tales, edited by Maria Tatar, who I mentioned in my TBR video for February, which I will also link down in the description box below, because I am currently reading her book, The Heroine with 1,001 Faces. So Maria Tatar is a well-known folktale, fairy tale scholar. So this one has, as I mentioned, it has different fairy tales from the classics, including some from Angela Carter, who I will also be talking about in just a few minutes. So again, if you're looking for a simple reference that contains both a fairy tale and some scholarly commentary, this is an excellent choice. The next book that I want to talk about in the realm of academia is M.L. von Franz's The Feminine in Fairy Tales. And this one I've only gotten a little bit into, but it does have several different psychological interpretations, lectures on Jung. If you're familiar with Carl Jung and his theory of archetypes, it talks about that in fairy tales. Psyche from the myth of Cupid and Psyche, shadow and evil in fairy tales. So I don't know how much I'm going to be able to get into this one in February myself because my TBR is quite stacked already, but this is definitely one that I want to get into. Now we're going to shift gears a little bit and we're going to go to a creepy Gothic style fairy tale book called Through the Woods. And this is written and illustrated by Emily Carroll. So you have a few different stories. My favorite from this one is A Lady's Hands Are Cold. So I just want to show you this illustration. And that just gives you a little bit of an idea about what you will find in this book. The next book that I want to talk about is Snow White Blood Red. And this is edited by Ellen Datlow, who, if you're familiar with the horror community, you've probably heard of Ellen Datlow. And you know that she is very prominent as an editor who collects all kinds of stories from all kinds of horror writers. And again, this is edited by both Ellen Datlow and Terry Windling. And this one is a magical book full of ogres, witches, trolls, princesses, kingdoms, dark and disturbing journeys. So this kind of takes the fairy tales that we may be familiar with and puts a little bit of a horror spin on them. So the next book I want to talk about is Her Body and Other Parties by Carmen Maria Machado. Now there's just one particular story that I want to talk about in this book in terms of fairy tale recommendations. And this is Carmen Maria Machado's take on the story of the green ribbon. You may have heard of the story of the green ribbon tied around a young woman's neck, and she doesn't want to take the ribbon off. And there's a reason for that I won't give you a spoiler for. But the story in this collection that is Carmen Maria Machado's take on the green ribbon story is called The Husband Stitch. Now, I do recommend this entire book, but for the purpose of Folklore February, The Husband Stitch is the story that I would recommend. Next, speaking of a feminist take on fairy tales, the incredible Angela Carter, and this is The Bloody Chamber and Other Stories. The Bloody Chamber is my favorite of all of these stories, although I love each and every one of them. But The Bloody Chamber is Angela Carter's feminist take on the Bluebeard story. So some of the other stories in this collection include a feminist take on Little Red Riding Hood, which I also like quite a bit. And as you can see, this is full of tabs. That is because I wrote a couple of papers on these stories for my feminism and gender and text course that I took in grad school. So I highly, highly recommend, if you are interested in feminist takes on classic fairy tales, look into The Bloody Chamber by Angela Carter. And the next book that I want to mention is Snow White Learns Witchcraft by Theodora Goss. So in this collection, Theodora Goss takes the classic fairy tales that we know, and then she centers and empowers the women from these fairy tales. And I want to read you a few stanzas of the poem that opens the collection, Snow White Learns Witchcraft, just to give you an idea of what kind of writing you will find in this book. One day she looked into her mother's mirror. The face looking back was unavoidably old, with wrinkles around the eyes and mouth. I've smiled a lot, she thought, laughed less, and cried a little. A decent life, considered altogether. And so she inherited her mother's mirror, but never consulted it. knowing too well the price of coveting beauty. She watched her daughter grow up, made sure the girl could run and fight, because princesses need protecting. And sometimes princes are worse than useless. When her husband died, she went into mourning, secretly relieved that it was over. A woman's useful life, nurturing, procreative. Now she thinks, I'll go to the house by the seashore where in summer we would take the children, really a small castle, with maybe one servant. There I will grow old, wrinkled and whiskered, my hair as white as snow, my lips thin and bloodless, my skin mottled. I'll walk along the shore collecting shells, read all the books I've never had the time for, and study witchcraft. What should women do when they grow old and useless? Become witches. It's the only role you get to write yourself. So I'll leave you with those three stanzas taken from the title poem, Snow White Learns Witchcraft. And if you like that, there's plenty more in this collection of poetry and stories. So, the next book that I want to talk about is a book that I talked about in my January wrap up. So, I will also link that video down in the description box below. But this one is Children of Chicago by Cynthia Pelayo. And it takes the Pied Piper of Hamelin story and weaves it into a contemporary murder mystery. And there's also references to other fairy tales too. But I won't say a lot about this one because I talked more about it in my January wrap up. So I'm looking around. That's all that I have for you today. And I hope that you enjoyed these fairy tale recommendations for all different styles and types. I hope you found one that works for you. And if you would like to know any more recommendations, I would be happy to give those. And if you have any fairy tale reimaginings or retellings that you'd like to recommend, please leave that in the comments. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have a wonderful day or night. Bye.